So oftentimes in the course of this Democratic primary, Hillary Clinton has invoked President Obama and basically used him as a shield to get away with taking a lot of money from special interests and corporations and Wall Street and big money donors. Now that makes no sense because Barack Obama himself, in his book, The Audacity of Hope, was like, people are crazy when they say money doesn't affect politicians. Of course it affects politicians. So the dodge that Hillary does, she does it for a variety of reasons. One of the most important ones is, hey, I get to invoke the relatively popular Democratic president that we have right now and say, I'm going to continue his legacy. The other guy is not. So she does it for that reason. But she also does it because it is a good deflection from the issue of her being bought and her being corrupt and bribed. Because her point is, hey, he was bribed too, he's corrupt too, and he wasn't that bad. Right. Look at Dodd-Frank. She always points to Dodd-Frank as like this panacea, this unbelievable, oh my God, we fixed everything with Dodd-Frank when it comes to Wall Street. Except no, Bernie's been sounding the alarm over this for a while, rightly so. He says Dodd-Frank has so many loopholes that the bankers went right back to doing what they were doing before the crash, and we're going to have another crash at some point. And it's not going to be because we didn't have regulation, or it's not going to be because of too much regulation, like the Republicans are going to say. It's going to be because the regulation we did, it wasn't good enough. So it's horrible in a variety of ways, but Hillary needs to stop using this dodge because it is a dodge and because it's not convincing, and it shouldn't be convincing to anybody. Well, what do you mean? I took $675,000 from Goldman Sachs for a speech. That doesn't mean anything. I'm not going to listen to them when they call me. I'm not going to do their bidding. Okay, sure. How can anybody believe that? So here's what Obama said in his book, The Audacity of Hope, and you make your own mind up as to how much money affects politicians. He said, I can't assume that the money chase didn't alter me in some ways. Increasingly, I found myself spending time with people of means, law firm partners and investment bankers, hedge fund managers and venture capitalists. As a rule, they were smart, interesting people, knowledgeable about public policy, liberal in their politics, expecting nothing more than a hearing of their opinions in exchange for their checks. But they reflected almost uniformly the perspectives of their class, the top 1% or so of the income scale that can afford to write a $2,000 check to a political candidate. They believed in the free market and an educational meritocracy. They found it hard to imagine that there might be any social ill that could not be cured by a high SAT score. They had no patience with protectionism, found unions troublesome, and were not particularly sympathetic to those whose lives were upended by the movements of global capital. Most were adamantly pro-choice and anti-gun, and were vaguely suspicious of deep religious sentiment. And although my own worldview and theirs corresponded in many ways, I had gone to the same schools after all, had read the same books, and worried about my kids in many of the same ways, I found myself avoiding certain topics during conversations with them, papering over possible differences, anticipating their expectations. On core issues, I was candid. I had no problem telling well-heeled supporters that the tax cuts they'd received from George Bush should be reversed. Whenever I could, I would try to share with them some of the perspectives I was hearing from other portions of the electorate, the legitimate role of faith in politics, say, or the deep cultural meaning of guns in rural parts of the state. Still, I know that as a consequence of my fundraising, I became more like the wealthy donors that I met, in the very particular sense that I spent more and more of my time above the fray outside the world of immediate hunger, disappointment, fear, irrationality, and frequent hardship of the other 99% of the population. That is, the people that I'd entered public life to serve. And in one fashion or another, I suspect this is true for every senator. The longer you are a senator, the narrower the scope of your interactions. You may fight it with town hall meetings and listening tours and stops by the old neighborhood, but your schedule dictates that you move in a different orbit from most of the people you represent. And perhaps as the next race approaches, a voice within tells you that you don't want to have to go through all the misery of raising all that money in small increments all over again. You realize that you no longer have the cash you did as the upstart, the fresh face. You haven't changed Washington, and you've made a lot of people unhappy with difficult votes. The path of least resistance of fundraisers organized by the special interests, the corporate PACs, and the top lobbying shops starts to look awfully tempting. And if the opinions of these insiders don't quite jibe with those you once held, You learn to rationalize the changes as a matter of realism, of compromise, of learning the ropes. The problems of ordinary people, the voices of the Rust Belt town or the dwindling heartland, become a distant echo rather than a palpable reality, abstractions to be managed rather than battles to be fought. That 100%, that to a T, describes the establishment Democratic Party. Obama has become this thing that he kind of bemoaned and feared in this part of the audacity of hope. Hillary Clinton long ago became that. Debbie Wasserman Schultz became that. Barney Frank has become that. Bill Clinton has become that. This is every establishment Democrat explained in the perfect way. I wouldn't change a word of it. Everything is exactly right. Because I think the main point, the most important line, is when he says, you learn to rationalize the changes, so the changes meaning your policy positions that are now more in line with your rich donors as opposed to the people. You learn to rationalize your changes as a matter of realism, of compromise, of learning the ropes. This is exactly how they look at Bernie Sanders. Naive, optimist, idealistic, wants to fundamentally change the system. That's too hard. That's not possible. And you're making us look bad when you try to function outside of the system as he has by saying no super PAC for me. No big money for me. $27 on average. That's all I want. I'm going to go to the people. The other establishment Democrats, you're making us look stupid. That's what the other establishment Democrats are saying. And they think, but I'm the one who's realistic. I'm pragmatic. This is realism to take money from the big money donors. It's compromise. It's learning the ropes. You have to sell out for these reasons. Bernie says no. So what does Hillary do? Goes in full-on defense mode and assault mode, where she berates him for something that he's unquestionably right about, which is the corrupting influence of money in politics. And she hides behind, even Obama took money. Oh my God, Obama took money from the big money donors. We all represent their interests, so it can't be that bad. But it is that bad. We want a guy who's going to change the system, not play within the system, and try to be as far left as possible from within this corrupt, grotesque, rotting system, which is way off to the right on the political spectrum.